I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for our program today, Prescription for Change, Improving Competition to Lower Drug Prices. I'd like to thank PCMA, the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, for sponsoring today's show. Rising prescription drug prices are a major concern for many Americans. 1 in 4 patients in the U.S. face financial challenges affording their medications, and 3 in 10 Americans say they did not take medications as prescribed due to cost, according to a 2022 Kaiser Family Foundation report. One remedy to high prices may be to increase access to biologics. These complex medicines derived from living organisms don't have traditional generic versions. Biosimilars are designed to provide a nearly identical product in the marketplace and, within a few years, at a lower price. What is the future of biosimilars? Would patent reform increase biosimilar competition and lower prices? And how can we bring down prices while also encouraging medical innovation? We will answer those questions and many more in today's program. Before we get underway, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillHealth. Our first guest is Congressman David Schweikert from Arizona, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Oversight Committee and the co-chair of the Telehealth Caucus. I sat down with him yesterday. Take a listen. Congressman Schweikert, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I first want to ask you about the mood in the House Republican Conference. We have seen a historic speaker vote, and the party was not united. You supported Kevin McCarthy from the beginning. Now it's months later. What is the mood in the House GOP conference?
I think for many members, they did not have in their head how hard they were going to work. You know, in an environment with open rules, where you actually get to do this crazy thing of trying to legislate. And this goes both for my brothers and sisters on the left and those who was, on the right. The previous 4 years, we functionally were ornamental. And so I actually see just the pace and the rhythm being wonderfully healthy, because there really is something, that concept of when you're busy and you're able to chase your ideas and try to legislate. There's something very fulfilling and rewarding in being able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that you're in the majority, you have the gavel. You're on the House Ways and Means Committee. You're heading the oversight panel. What's the agenda for the committee?
Everything.
Okay.
And I'm trying. I don't want to be.
You do have a vast jurisdiction. I will give you that.
And there becomes intellectually just your head spins. The jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee, when you start to think about, I have trade, I have Medicare, I have the unemployment fraud, I have Social Security, I have Medicare itself and its financing mechanisms. You have debt. You have so many things, and every single one of them is absolutely important. So how do you build a structure where it's not only on things where you really need to drill down and sometimes be a little bit brutal, understanding where you believe the administration, our treasuries, or the IRS failed their statutory obligations, down to just understanding policy. And did we, as members of Congress, fail to design something properly? So we've tried to create sort of a 3-tier model of, here's where we do correspondence. And we've even had a couple of our Democrat colleagues say, I really want to know about this. And we'll do a letter to that agency, to IRS, to Treasury, to others saying, can you walk us through how this is being interpreted and how you believe it is in sync with what Congress's intent was? Some were actually starting to organize roundtables where you may have, you're not going to have a stenographer there. It's about understanding. And so that's a little less head crashing, the formality of, I'm going to get my 5 minutes answering a got you question. But many of the things and Ways and Means we deal with are stunningly complex. And then obviously the traditional hearing model. And so we're trying to do all that at the same time.
Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, when I came to the Hill as a healthcare reporter, I reported on the creation of Part D. It wasn't easy for Republicans to get that over the finish line, but by and large, it's been successful. But of course, the issue has not faded, and people still want to get the price of prescription drugs down. What do you think are some of the solutions that the Congress and maybe the administration could do?
I have actually and I may be an outlier, I have a somewhat aggressive view on what you could do to improve the pricing structure of pharmaceuticals. But you have to be willing to give me 90 seconds here.
Sure.
The majority of what we consume is now off patent. Humira, the most expensive drug from the previous decade, is now off patent. A number of the A1Cs and other things that may be incredibly powerful in helping people mitigate issues in pre-diabetic, and these are functionally soon to be off patent. We know in some of the literature we've been tracking in our office that there's some revolutions in everything from how you manufacture small molecule to other types. Think of one example, picture rooms full of super high-speed 3D printers. Mm-hmm. That print pharmaceuticals. So you no longer need a $200 million facility. You now need something a fraction of the cost, and you're using technology to compete. How do I get every potential company that has an interest into the manufacturing business? How do I almost flood the market with competition? And then there's the next outliers, things like the insulin co-op that's being built in Virginia that actually, I think, comes online next year, that has made it very clear that co-op is made up of Medicaid systems, insurance companies, hospitals. They will functionally also, I mean, we know what Pfizer and some of the others have done, but the price they were going to do from the co-op, their list price was even lower than the subsidized price. That we were going to spend, $36 billion subsidizing big pharma. The very people that we attack, we're going to subsidize them to lower the price instead of a model where the primary 8 types of insulin are already off patent. How do I get multiple competitors to manufacture? So our model is very much of, could I get regulatory, tax, depreciation, other types of incentives to make a much more robust, a much more dynamic? And then you have to say some things that are heresy. And these are the things that get you in trouble is, okay, I will require calcium inhibitors the rest of my life. I have high blood pressure. Same prescription, incredibly cheap. Why can't I just buy it from the manufacturer? Mm-hmm. So even the disruption of how, the direct consumer markets with lots of manufacturers, it's a very different model than the left keeps giving us, which is a sort of scarcity price control model. And you already see the economic literature says, even though CBO has given it some positive scores, almost every other economist who's looked at it says just the opposite. It will create scarcity, and particularly scarcity of the next set of cures.
Are you specifically talking about the Inflation Reduction Act drug pricing provisions?
Yeah, or even its model. We're told that the budget, so I may be jumping ahead of us, we are going to see very shortly here coming from the White House, we'll have another variation of price management, mandatory negotiations with a fixed price. But even go back to, what was it, HR 3 from what was it, a year or two ago, where the model made it very clear that a lot of cures were going to disappear just because you've blown up the financing stack.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about, let's talk about the growth of generics and biosimilars. Where has it been and where do you think needs to go over the next 5 years? And is that, a big part of the solution?
Whether you know it or not, that's a brilliant question. And it's
Thank you.
But it's also a surprisingly complex one. And that's actually one of the examples we're doing around the roundtable. If you read some of the literature, and we subscribe to a lot of crazy things, the company out of Boston that believes it's actually now cured a handful of people of type 1 diabetes. Okay. It's a stem cell, and now they're waiting for FDA to give them permission to do their next phase 1, which will be with CRISPR tagging the stem cells so your body doesn't need anti-rejection drugs. The miracle of that conceptually, let's say it's real. You could actually build the biofoundry model where you can do a production line. It would be everyone with diabetes, even theoretically type 2s. So now also, if you have some of the new drug categories, that actually, odd, crazy thing, part of it is it has a shorter patent than you might think because it's been around longer, that you see people using for weight reduction. Could you actually build a model where we're going to fix parts of the farm bill? We're going to work with those who are type 2 diabetics to help them manage their weight. We're going to actually incentivize things like that Apple technology. It looks like it can do blood glucose right through your skin calculations. And then the holy grail of possibly curing people whose islet cells no longer produce insulin. The crazy part of this discussion is diabetes is 33% of all healthcare, 31% of all Medicare. It would be the single biggest thing you could do for US sovereign debt. So now when you have that conversation, is part of the disruption of productivity in the society, labor force participation, income inequality, could it possibly come through cures, through that healthcare stack?
And what about the role of innovation? Because some people say if you're making too many changes, and obviously, and I'd also like you to talk about the role of stakeholders, because as you know, a lot of times in healthcare, it's provider versus provider, and it's tough to get anything done. You mentioned you get in trouble when you say this or that, and that is the case where you can get a backlash.
Look, we have to deal, and I'm truly going to get in trouble how I say this, but we have to be intellectually honest with each other. Much of what Congress has done the last couple of decades is designing legislation saying, this is what we're going to reimburse. This is how we want something to be patented or licensed. We've almost created a structure that disincentivizes true levels of competition. We're bordering on being a protection racket. For incumbency, not incumbent members of Congress, but incumbent business models, incumbent bureaucracies. And the budget situation is much, much worse than almost anyone can process. When you think in 9 budget years, you can wipe out all of discretionary, military included, all discretionary, and you still have to borrow a couple $100 billion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the primary driver of all future debt over the next 30 years is healthcare.
And eventually it's got to be tackled, right? One way or the other.
So maybe it's time we have an honest conversation with our brothers and sisters on K Street and industry and this and that, saying you got a choice. We're going to double your taxes over the next 20 plus years. And that's what CBO's numbers say. Mm-hmm. Or we need to basically go to the moment of hyper disruption. But the hyper disruption is incredibly moral because it would be about curing people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're a leader in the telehealth caucus, and obviously we've seen massive jumps in telehealth during COVID. How does telehealth fit into the issue of drug pricing and getting better quality of life for people?
It's a brilliant. I like it because you know what a war telehealth was. Mm-hmm. Before the pandemic, I had a piece of legislation year after year after year, and was repeatedly told I was never going to get a hearing. The lobbying against it because it disrupted business models.
Right.
Let's be honest. So how do I take you from thinking that FaceTime on your phone is telehealth to the moment of what you can wear on your wrist, mm-hmm. what you blow into, what you lick, what you can urinate on? I mean, let's be honest. What happens when the flu kazoo, the thing you blow into that looks like a large kazoo that tells you have the flu, and the algorithm orders your antivirals? That technology has existed for 5 years now. But function because we don't reimburse it, because Social Security Act says you will see a doctor, because of state licensures at the pharmaceutical level and who can write a script. What would happen if you and I our vision is telehealth is much more than I'm having a FaceTime? It may be the avatar driven by ChatGPT in 2 years. Mm-hmm. And if we can prove it statistically accurate and you can insure it, which you already insure diabetic pumps, and that's an algorithm prescribing someone. Think about it. Someone when their blood glucose moves and their pump it's attached to them is dosing them. That's an algorithm that's dosing, that's prescribing, and it obviously has insurance. So it already exists in our medical world. Is that ultimate future of telehealth? And in many ways, is it still telehealth, or is it basically the adoption of technology to keep us healthy, but also disrupt the price of healthcare?
Last question: Are you optimistic? We have divided government. We're living in polarizing times. Do you think? And we got of course, another election coming up, as always, presidential this time. Do you think this Congress, divided Congress, with a Democrat in the White House, can get something done significantly on drug pricing or healthcare in general?
Let's see. I'm 61 years old and I have an 8-month-old, so I'm obviously pathologically optimistic. I'm becoming more optimistic because I think there's a reality that the budget numbers are so ugly. There is no mathematical way to cut or tax your way and make the numbers work. We functionally have lied to ourselves for decades, and it's demographics. We got old, so the path needs to be another rail. And I'm going to argue that new third rail, which isn't the one you step on and electrocute yourself, it actually is Republicans and Democrats legalizing technology, legalizing the things that create mass competition, and then a fixation on something like diabetes, where at the end of the decade, we've bent the curve substantially, and we can see it in our spending and borrowing.
Well, you certainly have a big agenda on the Ways and Means Committee, and should be an interesting Congress. And enjoyed the conversation, and we hope to have you again on soon.
You're very kind.